This program has been paid for by the sponsor and does not reflect the views of PCN.
Welcome to another edition of PHRC Speaks, Fair Housing in the 21st Century. I'm your host, Dion Garcia, Director of Enforcement for the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. I've often spoken about the work of housing justice and civil rights in general as a team sport. Anyone that knows anything about sports knows that effective leadership can make the difference between winning, losing, or even competing. Whether the leader has a vision and the drive to empower and inspire that vision in others is of paramount importance. For the last 6 years, we have had such a leader at the PHRC, who has been able to look at discrimination as a symptom of human brokenness and has led his team to address the symptom by inoculating the communities they reach with the principles of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s beloved community philosophy. Dion Lassiter is a nationally recognized expert in the field of American race relations. Lassiter worked on race, peace, and poverty-related issues in the U.S., Africa, Canada, Haiti, Israel, and Norway, and is called upon frequently by media outlets to provide commentary on race relations and potential solutions. Lassiter is a current executive director of the PHRC, where he has legislatively delegated authority to investigate filed complaints alleging the occurrence of unlawful discrimination in the areas of employment, housing and commercial property, education, and/or regarding public accommodations. During his tenure in this position, he has developed and launched a No Hate in Our State town hall to address the surge of white nationalism in Pennsylvania, and a social justice lecture series to provide an outlet for PA communities to discuss imperative issues, a global social justice initiative, a Black and Jewish beloved community dialogue, and the College Race Dialogue Initiative. He also serves on a racial reduction response team for those communities impacted by hatred. He oversees a staff of 87 with 3 regional offices that serve 67 counties in Pennsylvania, and he also manages an annual budget of about $12 million. His accolades are many, not the least of which was his recent appointment by President Biden to the Presidential Advisory Commission on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunities for Black Americans. And without further ado, welcome Dion Lassiter, Executive Director, ED as always, or El Maestro, which is what I usually call him. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm humbled and honored to be in this space with you.
I appreciate you taking the time. I know how busy you are. So let's just get right into it. You've often referred to your position at the PHRC as an assignment and your work as a calling. Can you fill our viewers in on this a little bit?
Yes, for your viewing audience, first and foremost, I'm a respecter of people who don't share a faith or a deity. And so for me, it starts with just coming out of a faith tradition, being a product of the Black church that produced a lot of the moral compass and moral imperative in me, along with 2 grandmothers, a mother and a father, and a community that shaped me. So when I articulate that I've never had a job. I've always had assignments given to me by God. And the PHRC was one such assignment. My calling is that of a servant leader. My other calling is that of being a social worker and social change agent. Fundamental to the core of my humanity, I wanted to only do 2 things: be a crossing guard and be a high school basketball coach. A crossing guard, because the crossing guard, when I was in middle school, she got my brother and I and the young people who I went to school with from one side of, the street corner to the other side of the street corner where we went to school. But it was more than that. She would always tell us, hold your head up, eat your vegetables, be polite, and that was like something that just really resonated with me. And so I always believed in this whole concept of safety. We were always safe with her. And then from a basketball perspective, you had mentioned in the intro, teamwork. Right? Basketball, you have to rely on your teammate. It's not about you making that pass and then showing off because your teammate got the ball and was able to make it, but it's about the collective. How can I give you the ball where you want it, how you want it, and then if you miss the shot, how can I still encourage you? So for me, it's always been about an assignment. It has always been about a calling, and all of the things I've done is centered around that.
Excellent. So you're now in your 6th year of this divine assignment. What has been your biggest pain point or your biggest accomplishment to
Yeah.
date? Because I know there's plenty to choose from.
No, great question. I think the biggest pain point initially was not having those who are in power to recognize the great work that you and others at the PHRC do. All 3 regional offices are comprised with individuals, whether they're a clerical staff person, whether they're in intake, whether they're in investigation, whether they're in the office of the chief counsel, whether they're under the social justice umbrella of enforcement, fair housing, it all. You all are the ones that put your dedication, your skill set, your knowledge base, your passion on the line every single day. So initially it was, how do we tell that story? How do we tell that story to those in the state assembly so that we can be adequately funded so that people don't have so much of the brunt of all of this human brokenness, whether it's real, perceived, or imagined. Real, perceived, or imagined as it relates to forms of discrimination. You had caseworkers, people who had cases of 100, 200 cases. So initially it was, how do we tell the story so that we can adequately get funded? The success has been a collective success. Seeing the intellectual maturation, seeing the professional maturation of so many individuals in so many key positions, seeing people who, even when they've left PHRC, they've been able to tell the story of how PHRC assisted them in kind of understanding how to do an impartial, neutral, unbiased investigation. So a lot of successful things. We've grown the complement now. As of the taping of this show, we're sitting at 92 with an additional 5 that's coming in the upcoming budget. We've been able to add a lot to what we're doing. Sitting right here with you, this show is a manifestation of not just my vision, it's a manifestation of your passion, your vision, my vision, the vision of Brittany Millinger that is able to tell the story to the wider audience throughout the Commonwealth about, fair housing.
Yeah, yeah. And we obviously appreciate the accolades and the opportunities, right? Because it is about leadership, and leadership is about being able to choose the strengths within your teams, team members, and putting them and giving them the support so that they can succeed in their role. So I appreciate that. Now, you've been traveling quite a bit all around Pennsylvania, listening to community concerns through the PHRC on the road tour. What are the most urgent housing justice concerns facing Pennsylvanians today?
So that's a great question. We're seeing a lot of challenges, not only in our urban centers, but also in our suburban centers, also in our rural centers. And so when we're doing this beloved community tour, we're going to communities where people are talking about landlord-tenant issues. They're talking about sexual harassment among some landlords. They're also talking about the lack of affordable housing. We understand that there's a lot of gentrification that's going on. And so some of these issues that we're hearing are very germane. Not only is it that what I'm hearing, but it's the things that the Fair Housing Division is hearing on a day-to-day basis. The role that you were in as the former director of Fair Housing Commercial Property, and now in your role as director of enforcement, the current director of Fair Housing Commercial Property, Carolyn Eister, outreach coordinator, Brittany Millinger, all of the things that you all are seeing. And so I look at it as a both and. It's individuals who are saying, listen, I'm having some challenges with my landlord. I'm having some challenges with regards to finding adequate housing against the backdrop of so many schools that are in these impoverished communities or communities that have a high rate and incidence of violence. And so all those things are very important for the work that we do here at the PHRC.
So as you're listening to all of this and you're taking it in, what is your vision as it relates to fair housing moving forward?
You know, you're aligning this up with some wonderful questions. And I'll push back intellectually that simply says it starts with the director of that particular space. Mm-hmm. I think your question is fair. Mm-hmm. And, I don't dodge questions. Right. And I love this organic and fluid exchange that you and I have. It just so happens we're doing it in the public domain. Well, one, I want to hear from Director Eister. I want to hear from Brittany Millinger. I want to hear from those individuals in the Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, as well as Philadelphia regional offices, how they're looking at the landscape of housing. That's what got us to our most recent successful Fair Housing Conference in Pittsburgh. Yeah. We know that there's some housing challenges in Pittsburgh. We know that there's some housing shortages of availability, and how do we affirmatively further fair housing? So one, it's listening to them. That's how I always start. I lean in by listening, I learn, and then I lead. My vision, though, for some of the work that we're doing is, one, to engage in a lot of participatory research, action research. Let's tell the story, like the amazing work that we did collectively with the white paper. We need to follow that up with looking at gentrification. We need to follow that up with looking at schools that are not equally funded against the backdrop of playgrounds that are riddled with high incidences of violence. That will necessitate whether or not people are going to move into communities. Also, appraisal bias. I would love to see us doing more work around appraisal bias, as well as doing more work around fair housing testing.
Absolutely. And so one of the issues that I know that we've talked in the past, and this isn't scripted, so I'm just going to throw this out here, but one of the things that we've talked about in the past is the disparate impact with regards to individuals that receive SSI or some kind of fixed income and are being denied housing. And we've talked a little bit about source of income protection and where the PHRC lies on that. What is your thought on that? Not to put you on the spot, just want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, and I'm cool with being put on the spot. I think that everything that you framed out with regards to this is apropos and more than important for the commissioners to move in that direction. I think we have to do more than just talk about it. I think that we need to push forward as it relates to making sure that we have regulations for this.
Yeah, agreed. And obviously studies would need to be done to make sure you have the data to support it, but yeah.
And I think there's enough data there. I just think we have to have the will to do it. And I think we will. The same way that we had the will and determination and the evidence-based data as it relates to our LGBTQ plus regulations, we have the same data in this space as well.
Sure. So you've also implemented an exciting program known as the Social Justice Ambassador Program. And there's a new Civil Rights Division. Can you share your vision for these two initiatives in the general social justice framework of the PHRC?
Yeah. Against the backdrop of all of the great work that advisory councils do. So for your listening audience, I want people first and foremost to understand we're very, very appreciative of all of the work that the advisory councils have done. We want to strengthen the ties with our human relations commissions around the state. The Social Justice Ambassador was simply a creation of how can we pull on the strength of all 67 counties. So in the aforementioned, you mentioned the surge of white nationalism, the surge of white supremacy. We know that we have housing discrimination. We know that we have discrimination in public accommodations, commercial property, education, employment. But with all that, there's still people who are practicing peace and justice. There are still people who see the dignity in you and I as men of color. There are still people throughout the Commonwealth who they don't discriminate against someone because they're disabled or because they're LGBTQ plus or because they're atheist or agnostic. And so Social Justice Ambassador was let's find one person in each of the 67 counties that can make up more of the beloved community. Not to take away from the advisory councils, not to take away from the human relations commissions, but individuals who come from whatever sector that they come from, that anytime that we want to come to a community and we want to have an event, but not just us having an event, they would do the same thing that the advisory councils would do. They will inform us of some of the challenges in the community, but also they would share with us, hey, this synagogue, this church, this masjid, this temple, this elementary school, this middle school, this high school, whatever the enterprise is, they want to have someone from the PHRC come in and do a informational data gathering or informational sharing of information. This is how you file a complaint, whatever the case may be. So that's what resonated with us first and foremost. How do we get the social justice ambassadors in that space? And then to the Civil Rights Division. More often than not, when there were challenges throughout the state, there would probably be a handful of us who would go out to address whatever the challenge may be in the particular community, whether that was the construction of our No Hate in the State Town Hall, speaking back to some of these challenges systematically and structurally. So the Civil Rights Division comes out of the framework and the model of the United States Department of Justice Office of Civil Rights, CRS, Community Relations Services. This is developed on the heels of, unfortunately, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., where Chicago was burning and there were riots because people just were angry. Philadelphia, Newark, St. Louis, Trenton, Camden, New Jersey, all around the country. I'd be remiss also if I didn't share that King said at that time that riots were the language of the unheard. I'm not here to say how people should cathartically, dump their anger and their frustration, But the Civil Rights Division was, how do we address some of the civil unrest and the civil disturbance and the civil interruption of what we saw during 2020 and George Floyd and multiple other incidents? High rates of AAPI hate, high rates of Islamophobia, high rates of anti-Semitism, high rates of hate towards Latino Americans, towards Native American, Indigenous, as well as African Americans, and all of the protected categories. And so the Civil Rights Division was something that I had a pregnant moment way back in 2019 when I was on a panel with then AG Josh Shapiro talking about how to combat anti-Semitism and racism in the Commonwealth. And that pregnant moment now, fast forward, has given birth to something called CROCS, which is the acronym for Civil Rights Outreach Coordinators. And I have to share with you and your viewing audience, when we were growing up, you and I, you would hear McGruff, take a bite out of crime.
Yes.
So Crocs was not the shoe Crocs, it's crocodile.
Right.
You want to have something that has teeth in it.
Has a bite to it.
Has a bite to it. And so we developed the Civil Rights Outreach Coordinators. We have 5 of them, 4 have been filled. Their table of organization is a brilliant supervisor by the name of Cheryl Meck. And then 3 of the Crocs, Hector Ortiz, Montrell Smith, and Joshua Nix. 3 are in Harrisburg. 1 is in Philadelphia. We're going to put another one in Harrisburg. And the vision is to have 2 in Pittsburgh, not in the so distant future, all with, making sure that they conciliate, they mediate. They don't do investigations. They conciliate, they mediate, they create something that we're calling peace builders. They're peace builders. They engage in preventive measures, but also we understand that sometimes we're going to have to respond. They partner with the Anti-Defamation League, the Philadelphia Urban League, the Pittsburgh Urban League, the Anti-Defamation League, all of the LGBTQ plus organizations, and so many other grassroots organizations. And lastly, they're in the midst now of establishing a social justice repository of all of the organizations that are on the front lines, but PHRC wants to be aware of those so that we can partner with them as well.
And so all of these, social justice ambassador program, the CROCS program, these are all proactive measures. Why is it important for you that an enforcement entity be so proactive?
Yeah. I think it's very important to be proactive and not wait for things to occur. I think it's very advantageous to not wait for the sky to be falling. And so being proactive essentially means we're in the community. We're listening to the community. We're learning with the community. Because for all too often, PHRC was that reactionary. We're in a reactionary mode. An incident happened here. Bullying and intimidation happened here. Well, if we're in the schools before the bullying and the intimidation happens, it's going to occur. But if we're in the schools and we've laid the foundation with young people, the work that we've done on college campuses, race dialogue, not dismissing any other category, but race dialogue among Black and Jewish students is a framework that comes out of the civil rights movement, the beloved community, Martin Luther King Jr. and others, Rabbi Abraham Yahshua Heschel and others coming together using 2 experiences, the African Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust, African American suffering, Jewish suffering, how they were able to get laws and bills passed. And once again, a reactionary mode is nothing wrong with that. But if you can get ahead of the housing discrimination, all of the work that you and Brittany and others have done, specifically under your leadership with Fair Housing and Power Hour, the ABCs of fair housing, right? You know this stuff before it occurs.
Right.
So if you have this model, this framework, you can say, wait a minute. That's housing discrimination. Because I was just on that Teams or whatever we're calling it today. Teams, Zoom, tomorrow to be something else.
Yeah.
But I was learning about this. How do I affirmatively further fair housing? Oh, I learned about this on that presentation around realtors having a responsibility to address the violations of the Fair Housing Act. And so once again, not an either or, a both and. At times, we're going to have to react. We get that call. We can't prevent things. But that educational outreach, that preventive model, that intervention, sexual harassment, awareness, intervention, prevention, Crown Act conference, all these things go into putting ourselves in a space where we're not social justice ambulance chasers.
Right.
You know about PHRC. So if an incident does occur, you can simply say, let's call PHRC. Or I remember when PHRC laid the foundation and the framework, communities can do their own No Hate in the State Town Hall. Communities can do their own Peace and Justice Awards. Communities can do a lot of the things that we're doing here at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission.
Yeah, and I want to encapsulate that by saying that it is very much, when we look at affirmatively furthering for housing, there's the reactive portion of the law, right, which is preventing discrimination and investigating that discrimination, providing outreach. But then there's the proactive, what should have been the proactive portion of the law, which is the affirmatively furthering for housing, desegregating neighborhoods. So there's always been two sides of that social justice law.
Certainly.
So let me ask you this, and this one gets a little deeper, right? How does the current state of social justice, or how does the current social justice climate, rather, impact the work of the PHRC? Are you seeing increased calls for PHRC's proactive intervention, and how is PHRC providing it?
So I would say, once again, both and. Because we're doing so much outreach, we're doing outreach through our advisory councils, we're doing outreach now with our CROCs, the work that our amazing director of education has done in the space of not just DEI, because I know that's become the boogeyman now. So I would just say equity work, right? And when we talk about equity, what are we talking about? I see the inherent decency and dignity in who you are as a human being. So when people want to talk about, well, it's JEDI, it's justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, or it's, DEI, or it's belonging, it's really about humanity, seeing the inherent decency and dignity of all individuals, Jewish individuals, LGBTQ+, all individuals. And so for me, I would champion the viewing audience to look at our most recent annual report that shows the amount of complaints that have come into PHRC, where they're at in indices of employment, housing, disability, education, so forth. I would say that the volume has increased because we have two very effective outreach coordinators, excuse me, Brittany Millinger and Kara Bowman. One sits under housing, the other one sits under education. We also have, you who have done the yeoman's work of fair housing training. Now we have others doing that. The work that I do, the work that Vanessa Edwards, we'll be here all day just talking about from the top of the state to the middle of the state to the bottom of the state, individuals who are doing presentations, who are doing trainings. With all that being said, I think we're seeing individuals who now know that we can contact PHRC. And people who are watching this on this particular Sunday, they need to know that we do trainings for free. And we're supposed to do trainings for free. We're mission driven. We can curtail the trainings for however people want the trainings to be. So that volume is up. But oftentimes there are so many things that we're not going to be able to come across. There's a lot of discrimination that occurs that will go underreported. I may not want to report it because I don't want to be retaliated against in the workspace. I may not want to report it because it activates a level of trauma. And so that's why it's important at PHRC that we're having trainings that are around anti-racism. We're having trainings that are around dealing with trauma. We want to move in the next year or two to becoming a trauma-informed care agency. And so I think when I look at the future of PHRC, I look at it from a perspective of the workforce is a workforce that they have a multitude of talent. They're committed. They resonate with where I'm at this stage in my shared leadership philosophy, because more often than not, I sit back and I listen and I marvel at some of the innovative things that they bring into the context here at PHRC. So I see the future of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission being extremely bright with a multitude of leaders who are not afraid to make decisions, who are not afraid to lead, and are not afraid to do it in tandem with others.
So I got one last question. Time flies when you're having fun, and I've enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise.
How do we create? Well, no, I want to ask this question. How has the conversation on immigration influenced refugee housing opportunities? How have you seen it? Because that's a conversation that's out there, and we know that there are repercussions for how people communicate this kind of conversation. How do you see it?
So I would have to honestly say that it's a conversation that I have not really dived into, but I'm willing to learn more about. I can simply say that at the crux of all of this is, excuse me, forms of xenophobia. So at the crux of all of this is how we're viewing people as other. So if it's migrant, if it's immigration, if it's this population, that population, the lens of xenophobia, the lens of we don't think that people are worthy of the protections under the law, specifically for us under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. So I don't think housing transcends that. I think it's part and parcel of that.
Yeah.
So great question.
Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule. I know how busy you are. So this for us is a treat. And we finally were able to get the stars to align. It took an eclipse, but we got you here.
So I just want to look at the camera and just say, for my own edification and educational purposes, I just want to thank Director Adrian Garcia for just allowing me to be in a space to learn so much about fair housing with wonderful works like The Color of Law, Doug Massey's American Apartheid, and just how important it is to continue to educate people on the Fair Housing Act. So I just want to once again commend you on all that you do in the fair housing space. And once again, thank you for having me in this space with you on this wonderful, wonderful Sunday.
Thank you so much for the kind words. I also want to thank you, the viewer, for joining us today. For more information on this topic, or if you believe that you've been a victim of discrimination in a housing transaction, visit us online at www.phrc.pa.gov or call us at 717-787-9780. We're also pretty easy to find online on Facebook, X, Instagram, and LinkedIn. That's it for this edition of PHRC Speaks. Until next time, take care, be good, and be fair to each other.
This program has been paid for by the sponsor and does not reflect the views of PCN.